Okay, so moving on, our next speaker is Mr. Alexander Holt um, from the Scottish Government, Emerging Opportunities and Partnership Digital Directorate. He will be talking about GovTech, why startup innovation is essential for future public service delivery, but how do you procure what you don't know exists? So lessons learned from the Scottish Government's multi-award winning, internationally renowned CivTech Programme. This session will have practical lessons for anyone in government or large organizations developing innovation programs. So over to you, Alexander.
Dr. Latif, thank you very much. And first of all, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. Well, thank you all very much for taking the time out of your precious days to listen and absorb some of this hopefully amazing material, not just from me, but from everyone you've heard thus far and you'll hear later. And it was really enjoyable listening to Nadine talking about the importance of place and how we can build some of the positives from the COVID response into our urban planning. And indeed, the 20-minute neighbourhood model in France is something that the Scottish Government itself is very interested in. So looking at the lineup today, lots of folk from the UAE and also Australia and New Zealand, places which I have over the past 3 years visited in the days when one could properly visit, and presented what I'm about to talk about today, the CivTech Programme, in much earlier guises. So I'm just going to share my screen and put up a presentation on. And just take a few moments just to line everything up. So what I'm going to talk about really is what the CivTech Programme is, why it's come about, and in the context of resilience and innovation, why it's critical to have programs such as this lined up and working. And so I'll be giving some case studies around innovation and but critically, the lessons learned and what can other organizations learn from programs such as this. So for those who aren't familiar, there we are. Good. For those who aren't familiar, this is, the GovTech is, like many of the X-Techs, about disruptive technology for government services. So it's how do we deliver better government services? And the CivTech Programme is run out of the Digital Directorate of the Scottish Government. So thinking about the focus on digital, that's the natural place for it to be. So we were set up in 2015, and indeed my background was I used to run my own digital agency in London for many years, delivering super shiny web apps for likes of Google, PayPal, Sony Ericsson, E.ON, lots of big brands. And it was that experience of running my own business coupled with the experience of running some tech procurements for government as a contractor to put those two hats together of running a business and also procurement for government to deliver a different way of accessing the market. So our mission is to drive daring and innovation in the public sector by collaboratively solving challenges that make people's lives better. And in doing so, creating generations of sustainable high growth businesses. So what this program is about is we had in, and we're based in Edinburgh, in the capital of Scotland. And I show that map because it shows that this, in terms of the land mass of Scotland, it's very rural. And yes, we have cities such as Edinburgh, Glasgow, Dundee, and Aberdeen. but actually the majority of the space of Scotland is very rural. And that presents challenges around the delivery of public services. So we are housed in a hideous 1960s building called Codebase, which happens to be the UK's largest tech hub. So well over 100 startups and scale-ups in there, where as a government programme focused on digital, this is exactly the place where we want to be. However, it's what we look out onto that counts, and that's our view of Edinburgh Castle. So for those who have in the days visited our studio, they've been greeted with this view, which is an inspiration for us all, but also a metaphor, because I look at this rocky crag and I think in the early days of starting an innovation program, the rocky crag that one was trying to climb in getting an innovation program started within government. So there were 3 questions that we set out to answer in 2015. And the first was, in a world where technology moves so quickly, how do you procure what you don't know exists? And secondly, how do you leverage the purchasing power of the public purse to deliver better public services and economic development opportunities? So, how could we procure better and using that government money to be the springboard for innovative, exportable technologies? And thirdly, is how do you create the capacity, the capability, and the culture to move civil servants from a place of risk aversion to one of risk receptiveness? And if you think about the response to COVID and what it means to us as governments and us as citizens and businesses, a change in culture is key, because we're having to adapt to unprecedented times. But equally, innovation has such an important role to play. But how do we understand what is out there and then critically get it through the doors of government? So what we do is we bring together public sector organizations, entrepreneurial companies, which may be just an idea, it may be a startup, a scale-up, a large company, but bring them together along with citizens to rethink how we solve public sector challenges. And what I mean by a challenge is where we state a problem. So it might be, how do we improve our flood warning capability in smaller communities? How do we improve our access to health data? How do we improve our management of remote sites? So posing a question rather than a closed prescriptive tender. Because for those who have been involved in procurements, the challenge has always been of these writing several documents, hundreds of pages of documents outlining what it is we need, but actually, or what it is we want, but actually what we want is not necessarily what we need. So how this comes together is that we pull together a flow, and we call it the CivTech innovation flow, where we define challenges around public sector innovation and the challenges that I mentioned earlier, and then we invite people to come to the come with their solutions. And then what we do is we take forward 3 companies per solution offering and take them into something called exploration. And that's it. So in essence, is 3 companies, 3 weeks, and 3K. Although the figures have gone up for the COVID response. And what we do there is then they understand more about us and the organizations, and we understand more about them as a company. And from there, we take one company forward out of, in cohorts of 10 challenges, one company per challenge into the accelerator. I'm sure those will be familiar with accelerators, where there are intensive periods of work with companies around developing products. In this case, they're working with their first client because they're the one that has set the challenge. And we provide workshops on product, business, and personal development to those in working with those solutions. And so the key thing that we provide as a government institution is access to senior directors within the public service, public sector, that small businesses would really struggle to get access to. And at the end of that accelerator, we have a demo day. This is common, where people present their MVPs, their minimum viable products. So when we first set out, we had 150, and then up until 150 in the room. Then last year, or actually earlier on this year, in March, just before lockdown, we had over 500 at the Edinburgh International Conference Centre. But innovation is key, and it was very interesting listening to Nadine just before me around the importance of innovation. But from a public sector point of view, is you really need to then provide that contractual pathway for innovation to land within the government and the public sector. So these accelerators and incubators are all very well, but you need something afterwards where there's real money to help scale the solution. And of course, when we were set out, we were thinking, well, are these challenges just Scottish or UK based, or are they in fact global? In which case is the public sector sitting on a goldmine of economic development opportunities. And so over the past 4 years, we've run 5 cycles. And this is, I appreciate it's quite small on the screen, but what we do is we've taken it from the concept of GovTech, which we consider quite internal to public sector, through to CivicTech, which is really citizen focused and citizen inspired. So we've helped organizations within government, such as some of our cities, understand the full view of their customer base, through to helping our foreign direct investment agency understand where their investments might be better, which people to target for inward investment, through to our police force and trading standards, helping consumers buy bona fide real goods off the internet as opposed to fake ones. Through to the whole civic tech spectrum of helping young people with their mental well-being, or indeed around flood warning in communities. So in terms of GovTech accelerators around the world, there are a number of them, and this was published the end of last year around where people are situated. And obviously we've got the Dubai Futures Accelerator, and we have Civic Labs in Victoria in Melbourne. And certainly what was wonderful speaking to the folks in Victoria 3 years ago was explaining how CivTech operated, and then for them to set up their Civic Labs. We get on very well with the folks there. So to give you some pictures, some examples, here is the flood warning kit. So conventional flood warning systems are hugely expensive and don't justify the time to build in communities. Whereas we had someone come in and their idea was very simple: to take a car bumper sensor and turn it 90 degrees to measure distance down the way, wrap it in a 3D printed case with a LoRa transmitter, and have these as sensors on strapped onto bridges, and then sensors within people's living rooms. So this cost per unit is hugely low, and as such presented an amazing return on investment for our Environmental Protection Agency. And then when it came to understanding, building up pictures of where to invest, Deep Miner worked with our Foreign Direct Investment Agency, Scottish Development International, to help them understand a better picture of where to look and what was going on in markets, in particular target markets. And a key thing around consumer behavior is ensuring that our consumers are buying real goods off the internet, not fake goods. So this was a company that worked with our police force and trading standards to produce a system if you look up Fistelworks, a system that helps consumers understand whether they're buying something fake. So it takes multiple points of data and establishes through their algorithm whether something is likely to be fake or not. And if we think about, and thinking Nadine earlier about the places and the importance of outside spaces, in Scotland, given that rural map, a lot of our tourist places are remote and not necessarily manned. So that's important for us to understand the footfall and what's going on there. So wilderness sensors came with a small discrete device that we put at unmanned visitor centres to understand not only what the flow through of people are, but also what the environmental data is happening. So building up different bits of data, pulling it in to then give people an idea of actually what's happening at these unmanned sites. And so we come to CivTech 5.0, and what is the future, particularly in this COVID environment? Well, we've just launched a challenge around asking people to help us deliver ethical, explainable AI. So everyone looking at the rundown of these 2 days, AI features considerably, but how do we make it ethical and explainable to people? And that's a real challenge. And we put out a call in the summer for asking citizens of Scotland and further afield to say, what do they think the future direction of Scotland should be as a digital nation? Again, in the context of building a resilient nation that can operate in the new environment that we find ourselves. And so we had our demo day in March, and this is demo day 4.0, and I'll use 2 examples of what's happened to companies from there. So one company has gone on to, there's a real challenge around tree planting. So the restrictions around COVID has meant that we stood at risk of not being able to plant any trees because you need people closely confined in a tractor off the back and looking at that and planting that way. And on a good day, you plant around about sort of 100,000. But one of the companies that came through was using a biodegradable ribbon tape into which the seeds were planted. And what they were able to do 4 weeks ago was break an unofficial world record of planting and laying the planting for over 1 million trees in one day. And given the nature of how the tool worked, it meant that you required fewer people than before and could operate within the appropriate COVID measures. So this has been a huge standout success, and certainly our forestry agency, Forestry Land Scotland, will be taking this further. So that's at one end. And then if we think about almost the challenge that often the public sector organizations face is getting people on board and getting them through the doors, because you've got talent out there and people do want to work for public sector, but often the challenge is about getting through quickly. And we have faced the loss of talent in that process because our pre-employment checks can take up to 5.5 weeks. But what if you had a solution that could reduce that to 9 calendar days? And this is certainly what one of the companies delivered for us in their early stages. And so this is being rolled out further across government. So again, a huge win in how you get technology and innovation into government working for it to serve citizens better. So in terms of jobs created, even just back in March, we had an independent assessment and nearly 150 jobs been created just from the first 3 cohorts, and contracts, over 6 million contracts, 4 million investment. So we've got the stats that shows why this is delivering on the promise. So giving companies and startups that springboard into real commercial viability. And we're about to do a new roundup of this where we know that a number of our companies have secured additional investments and are really on a scaling trajectory. So what have we learned? And this is the key thing for for people listening in terms of if you're thinking about adopting a program and rolling a program out. There are laws, there are rules, and there's guidance. And in our journey, we found that the laws were generally quite flexible, but we'd put rules around them that made it inflexible. And then the guidance would bear little resemblance to the laws. And this is key when you're starting out, is because many people will say, well, you can't do that. And actually, if you have good lawyers who can say, well, legally, this is what you're allowed to do, but organizationally, you've put rules around it to restrict you. So the legal basis is true, and the rules you put around is restricting. So often I'd start at the start of the journey I would say, show me the law, not the rule. And this is a can of, it's going to spray oil, it's WD-49. And this slide we put up to show that actually, things take time. It took 40 versions before they got to something that they were happy with. And actually, innovation, failure within innovation is part of innovation. So it's not necessarily going to work first time, but if you do small, try it again, work on agile methodologies and get the feedback, then you'll come out with the hugely successful product. And we have this up in the studio, which is, talk to the people you don't know more than the people you do and see what happens. And in that sense, we are part of a wider ecosystem. It's not just about an innovation team within a government. We have the rest of the public sector. We have foreign governments, academia, community groups, young people, skills academies, investor groups, third and charity sector, private sector, trade bodies, all these parts which make up a wider innovation ecosystem. And it's really key that you have these links joined between each of these. But coming back to the flow, there's a key thing around procurement. Again, anyone who's interested in procurement around this, that in our map and our model on our orange squares, we took 3 companies forward into the yellow square. Why this? Three, we do a sift down to 6 and then to 3. So our analysis of this showed that a third of the teams ranked highest in the first sift to then win a place in the accelerator. In other words, if you took the first score, 2/3 of the people that eventually went into our accelerator wouldn't have made it. And then you go into the exploration phase. So that's this yellow box here, that the company ranked the highest there. Only half of the companies ranked highest there, then went on to the accelerator. In other words, as we got to know the company, know the solution, we then saw whether they were a better fit. And that's the key thing. It's the cultural fit for teams working with government that counts. So the final point I want to talk about is that the CivTech program has been operating since 2015. And this has grown, this methodology has grown amongst countries around the world. And particularly think of our friends in Melbourne and UAE and Central Europe. We've grown something called the CivTech Alliance. And when we had our demo day with 500 plus people, nearly 20 countries attended to see an innovation program in action. So we've set this up. So if anyone is interested in running an innovation program that focuses on GovTech or Civic Tech and wants to join this community, we run weekly video calls. So there are people on this screen grab from Denmark, Poland, Barbados, US, Lithuania, Israel, London. So a whole spectrum of folk. And it's about helping and sharing the knowledge that we have amongst the programs. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch and listen to this. And my email address is there if anyone would like to get in contact, or of course you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to take any questions. So back to you, Dr. Latif.
Thank you, Alexander. It was a great presentation. And if there are any questions, please feel free to unmute your microphones, or you can type in the chat window. Okay, so I have one quick question.
Hello?
Yes, Nadine, go ahead.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Alexander, for this presentation, and it was quite interesting. I have two questions, really. One is, I know that your experience is that the whole program is hosted within a public sector, I would say, culture. But I want to ask you, what is the incentives? What were the incentives that you felt that these innovation companies like social entrepreneurs or startup companies have been responding to most to encourage them to go through the process, because it's a tedious process?
So you're very interesting about the whole point about a tedious process. When we designed this, we wanted to make this as streamlined as possible. So our application form, you have to answer 7 questions on it. So the first thing is, how do you make it approachable and easy for people to sign up? So first thing is easy application. Secondly, is that it's very fast timescales. So we deal within weeks rather than months. And it's about getting people rapidly through a process, because small businesses can't afford, from a cash flow perspective, to hang around. And we really understand that. And the team that we started with, half of them had either built, sold, or crashed their companies. So the timescales were quick. We paid people to pitch. That exploration phase is really actually an opportunity for people to spend some time on a bid and be paid for it. Because certainly my experience from the marketing agency world, digital agency, is that would never happen. So how could the public sector do something that the private sector doesn't? And then as you go through the accelerator, it's increasing contract size. So 3,000 or 5,000 to 25,000 to up to 220,000. And the companies get to keep their IP and their equity. So, there are various incentives, but what people really appreciate most was the access to public servants they would never otherwise get access to. So these are some of these steps we took to ensure that it made sense for small businesses and even people with ideas to get involved. I see someone's posted some questions here. Any advice for developing cultures for innovation? Again, the key thing is collaboration, that you're very much part of an ecosystem. And developing that culture is not within one team. It's about being exposed to different ways of working. And one of the things we did with the workshops was that we took those workshops on product, business, and personal development, and we then put the public sector companies into them, public sector challenge sponsors into them. So they said, well, actually, learning how to pitch, understanding a value proposition, or what our mission, vision, and values are, that's as applicable to public sector organization as it is a small company. And so we then launched our public entrepreneur program. And this is a program where we take civil servants through the mindset of the entrepreneur and give them accessible tools and techniques to go out and really make a difference immediately back in their place of work. So it's the whole developing culture. And also what's key is you need sponsorship from the top. We were very lucky, had a very good director, Colin Cook, who was able to pave the way for this. So you need a key sponsorship, as well as if you're in government, and ministers who take an interest as well. I see some other questions there?
Okay, any other questions, please? So one question, are you following any standards,
Yes.
or is there any standardization body which is you are using for CivTech projects or procurement? Is there any standardization efforts being done in this regard?
Yeah, so the Scottish Government have, for digital, have a set of standards that people technically should certainly look at. So if it's conventional procurement, then things have to be delivered to that. And if it's a challenge procurement, then we advise them to do it. But there's a key thing around service design and putting users at the heart of the services that are delivered. So, and we have a playbook on service design. So people may well be familiar with that double diamond of how you define and then ultimately deploy services. So yeah, they're absolute standards. But for some of this stuff, it's very new, and so some perhaps the standards aren't as clear cut. I mean, the key thing what this does is that it helps government understand better, if they do want to do a national rollout, what things are working, what things aren't. So from that point of view, we're not having to spend millions rolling out, doing a big rollout, because we've done that initial take first of exploring what works and what doesn't.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions from the audience, please? Okay, if there are no questions, then I would like to thank Mr. Alexander for his precious time and the lovely presentation. It was nice listening to your talk.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks everyone. Have a great rest of the day. So thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.